Hello, everybody, and welcome to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you're watching on our growing YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, THI's very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And, Andrew, we're here for the second episode of our THI preview podcast of the season, obviously here to preview North Carolina's Saturday evening matchup in Kenan Stadium against Georgia State, 7:30 p.m. kickoff set for that one, which I'm sure will be a pretty good atmosphere for the Tar Heels, as that'll be their first home game in front of a full capacity crowd in over a year. So I'm sure Carolina fans are really looking forward to that one as well. First ever meeting between Georgia State and North Carolina too. So going to be a first time meeting between the two schools. And obviously, if you guys watched the last episode, you can tell by the title, we're here to preview that matchup ahead of it. So, AJ, obviously, we all know what went down on last Friday with Carolina dropping their season opener in Blacksburg to Virginia Tech, 17-10. We obviously did the Three Things video afterwards as well, kind of going in and talking about that one a little bit. We're not going to relive that one. We're not going to go deep on that one, obviously, because we're moving on for that and focusing on Georgia State. But I know, obviously, this game coming up has some ties in some ways to what happened in Blacksburg last week because of how Carolina performed and some of the struggles that they saw on both sides of the ball, really, particularly on offense for most of the game. So I guess we'll start with this before we kind of dive into the individual teams. But, you know, how important is this game against Georgia State? I was about to say Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech didn't play very well over the weekend either. Yeah. Well, it's on the schedule, so it's important. Mm-hmm. And I know that some people will disagree, and we've had some disagreement on our message boards and some other forms of social media about a column I posted Tuesday afternoon saying this is a really big game. And it's a really big game if you understand it from the perspective of a program itself, a program moving forward. Carolina basketball, and I'm going to use basketball as an example here because I think everybody watching will understand that. Roy Williams has scheduled a lot of games over the past where early in the season he played a team a directional school, a school that was from a third tier, Division I conference, one that Carolina should beat by 35 points. And I've covered a lot of those games, and he was just as focused and just as intense in those games, getting his guys to play properly as he was when they would play Louisville or Virginia or Duke. I covered Coach K and Duke for 13 years, and I've covered their games against the Albanys of the world, against the Hofstras. Well, Hofstra's not a bad program, but the Radfords of the world. And Coach K had the same intensity, and those were the games that the coaches coached intensity a little bit more. They were trying to bring it out of their kids. The same thing happens in football. Every year before the Auburn game, the week before, Alabama plays some crap from FCS, right? Mm-hmm. And Saban is extremely focused in those games, getting his guys to play at a certain level. My point is this. A lot of people think that Carolina's just going to roll out on the field and clobber Georgia State. They very well could do that, although Georgia State is not an FCS program. This is an FBS program that in the last few years has won at Tennessee. Ty Chandler lost to Georgia State. And I think they've beaten South Carolina. They're in a conference of Sun Belt in the last couple of years, has won games. If you saw Louisiana and Texas the other day on national TV, Louisiana's in the Sun Belt Conference, and they went into that game ranked. So they're going to play decent athletes. They're going to play some guys that might be able to break some plays against them and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, Carolina should go out there and just roll these guys over physically because they're far more talented, right? But this week is about fixing what happened Friday night, and a lot happened. That checklist was a lot longer than a lot of people expected it would be leaving Blacksburg. So the weekend was about the uncomfortable conversations that Mac Brown told us he was going to have and confirmed Monday that he did have. You go from there to identifying what needs to be fixed, and then you start the process of fixing. Good football teams are outstanding on Tuesday, outstanding on Wednesday, outstanding on Thursday, and no matter who they're playing, they have the right disposition, the right frame of mind, the right level of intensity and focus, and that leads to the proper level of execution and communication and all that fine intangible stuff, no matter who they're playing. Communication, execution, and defensively early in the game disorientation were issues for the Tar Heels Friday night. So you want to see all those things at a high level Saturday. You don't want to see a team roll out there and say, well, I'm just physically better than these guys, so I don't need to worry about the intangibles. Because guess what? You get nothing out of the game. If you want to be a better team when you face UVA, if you want to be a better team when Florida State and Miami roll in, if you want to be a better team when you go to South Bend, you've got to use this week and Saturday's game as an opportunity to be the best that you can be. And be the best that you can be is clearly communication, execution, all those things, because North Carolina learned a very valuable lesson Friday night. It just can't roll out there and win. Yeah. It's not good enough yet. When we talked about the CFP podcast, one of the things we said was, are they really ready yet? They showed Saturday night they're not. Notre Dame had a lot of issues when it went to Tallahassee and it found a way to win that game. And I'd probably argue that Virginia Tech's better than Florida State. So Carolina learned Notre Dame had that extra layer, able to win that game. Carolina didn't have that. So they must dot their I's and cross their T's, and building those habits and making that a regular part of who you are is what this week and Saturday's game is all about.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's obviously a disappointment for Carolina fans and for North Carolina as a whole. I mean, don't get it twisted. The team and the staff are incredibly disappointed with how they played last Friday. You can go listen to the press conferences that they had on Monday, and you can tell that pretty quickly, especially from Mac and even after the game. But I do agree that the preparation leading up to it has to be consistent. There's no drop off, depending if you're playing Georgia State this week and then you're playing, like they're playing UVA next week, just because the levels in the ACC game and maybe a little bit more importance in there goes up a little bit with UVA. It doesn't matter. Your preparation during the week has to be the exact same because, like you mentioned, that's what good teams do.
It leads to the execution. Let me give you an example that Phil Longo gave us Monday. I asked him about that last play when Sam was getting dragged to the ground. He tried to throw the ball away and ended up being picked. And I asked him, he didn't quite answer the question. I said, was that one of those cases? Actually, it's better to take a sack, survive, play another day. Okay, that's immaterial right now to my point. My point is instead of going to that, he went right into how the play broke up and what happened. And a guard went the wrong way. So that was not a case of Virginia Tech out physicaling Carolina and getting to Sam. A guard made a mistake. So against Georgia State, you want that guard to not make that mistake, because if he doesn't make that mistake against Georgia State, then they've made progress in that area. And it had nothing to do with who was lining up on the other side of it. Why that mistake was made. The illegal receiver downfield penalties had nothing to do with Virginia Tech's physicality. The fact that defensively, they were getting whipped at the line of scrimmage, but Carolina's defense looked disoriented the first three series, okay? Some of the guys didn't look like they were reading the pre-step stuff well. Jeremiah Gilmore was like, yelling all kinds of stuff at guys looking all over the place because they were out of position. So when you go up against Georgia State, be in position, be in better pre-snap situations. Georgia State, hopefully for Carolina's sake, is going to throw everything at them. Yeah. They're going to run all kinds of reverses. They're going to run all kinds of misdirection stuff. They're going to run eye candy out the wazoo in pre-snap, which means Carolina will be challenged in the mental part of the game before the physical stuff takes over once the ball is snapped. That's how you become an excellent team. That's how this program is going to reach its potential, because there are a lot of other teams that, when they run out of the tunnel, have similar talent as Carolina. Oh, yeah. Some have less that could beat them. We saw that Friday night, and that's not to take anything away from the Hokies. Hokies can be a pretty good team. They're ranked right now, by the way. That's how impressive that win was for the Hokies. But my point is, just like with Roy's teams, if they were throwing the ball around and turning it over, that's when he would call timeout up 15 in the first half against the Georgia States of basketball, and he would tear into his team. I saw him break a clipboard up like 18 with 3 minutes left in the half of the game against like Winthrop or something like that.
That sounds like something.
I guess it would. And he broke a clipboard because their focus wasn't there, because you cannot waste that opportunity. Every minute you're on the court, try to get better, try to do things the right way. And in football, every snap, do the same way. That's why this week's game is really, really big. They need to show that they can do the mental things that handle a lot of the intangibles of the game that weren't always handled Friday night.
Yeah, and I think it's all about standard, with the program and trying to hit that standard and remain at that standard. And
you're 100% right.
You got to do it against the Georgia Techs. Oh, it's not Georgia Tech. I knew I was going to say that at some point. The Georgia States of the world and the Georgia Techs of the world when you're playing them in the ACC. So yeah, it's super important. Let's dive. I'm going to run off some stuff on Georgia State real quickly before we dive a little bit more into them, because I think they're in some ways a little bit interesting, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously lost their first game last week, 43-10 to Army at home. I know Army on paper may not look great, but that's a tricky opponent to play in your opening game of the year because of the way they play and the guys they have. But when you actually dive down into the team itself, return all 11 starters on offense from a team in 2020 that averaged a school record 33.3 points per game. So this is an offense that can put up points. That's why it's a little interesting that they were only able to put up 10 against Army. But I did look a little bit into that game, and I think Georgia State had 2 turnovers early. I think it was something like
17 minutes time of possession because Army chews up and swallows the clock.
Yeah. That's what they do. And I think it was 27-3, 27-10 at half. So Army really jumped out.
They had 177 total yards of offense, which is miserable.
Exactly.
It's miserable against a team with Army's talent level. But when you peel away the layers a little bit, there was a little bit of an explanation, but you shouldn't lose 43-10 at home to Army if you're a contender in your division in the Sun Belt Conference.
Exactly, especially a team that, like I said, returns all 11 starters. And you kind of break it down even more. You got a running back in Destin Coates, who's preseason first team all Sun Belt. We got a wide receiver in Sam Pinckney that's the first team all preseason Sun Belt as well. So you've got some weapons on offense. Sophomore Cornelius Brown is their quarterback. I think he had a decent year last year and a very athletic guy. Guy can throw the ball a little bit and obviously use his feet as well. But even diving into a little bit more, if you look at that preseason Sun Belt team, no preseason first team guys on the defensive side of the ball for Georgia State. So I think this is a team that Carolina, on paper at least, and what you can see from Army, should be able to put some points up on if they can play to their potential. But, if they play like they did against Virginia Tech last Friday, they will not put points up on Georgia State, or not as many as they can. So I think Georgia State offensively could pose a lot of threats to Carolina if they can get the things rolling and get the ball rolling when you look at how successful they were last year and the guys that they returned. But, I mean, is this a team that Carolina should beat? Yes, absolutely, yes. 150%. But this is not, like you said early on, this is not an FCS opponent. This is a Georgia State team that could pose some threats to Carolina, and I think especially on offense, more than likely will.
I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but going back to what I was saying, this is the kind of team that if you let your guard down on 3rd and 12, they can convert.
Exactly.
So that's why this is so important. If you want to be a team that can handle South Bend, and if you look, the ACC is a big, giant opportunity right now. If you're paying attention this weekend, it's conceivable they still meet Clemson for a spot to get in the CFP. We have no idea what's going to happen around the country. And the ACC's got a lot of opportunities to kind of rebuild the narrative about the league right now. And Carolina fans should root for those teams to do that because it can help the Tar Heels down the road. But nevertheless, if you're going to end up playing Clemson again, you have to be at your best every snap. That has to become a foregone conclusion. And Georgia State's the kind of team offensively, like you're saying, that if you're not fully dialed in, if there's some miscommunication in pre-snap, they can take advantage of it. That's why this kind of stuff's important. Don't dismiss it saying, they're going to beat up a crappy team and get nothing out of it. I guarantee you the coaches will review the game film and they will look at the things that we're talking about. And the other thing about this game too, and I don't want to get too much into Georgia State, I don't think if Carolina is focused and they communicate and they're prepared and they play hard, they're going to win the game. Okay. That's the bottom line. So what else can they get out of it? Well, I was surprised. I know I probably heard from more people about the number of guys that didn't play Friday night than I actually have about the sacks and all the other things. 19 guys on defense. They didn't play a lot of guys on offense. We've heard a lot about the reserve offensive line. Second team offensive line guys, reserves play a total of 19 snaps. We didn't see any reserves at middle linebacker. Cedric Gray's name was talked up a lot during August, and we didn't see him on the field. No. I don't think we'll see Storm Duck if they didn't play him against Virginia Tech because they're being overly cautious. They're not going to run any risk against Georgia State. We may not even see Brian Anderson as well for the same reason. So it's an opportunity for Kieran Johnson to get another game under his belt at center and get a little bit better. But I want to see reserves. I want to see some of the other guys play. Cameron Ruck only played 5 snaps in Blacksburg, and he got a sack, by the way. His dad's been quite prolific on Twitter, pointing that out.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I love him. He's fun to follow.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
But we want to see a lot of the other guys play. If you want to see Keyshawn Silver getting a 4-point stance, you're going to see that Saturday night probably. If you want to see Ra Dilworth and Power Echols get some reps, get a lead, and get them on the field so we could see them. I don't know if DJ Jones is going to play or not. I'd like to see more of him because I really like him. I think but he's got trouble staying healthy, and he got banged up again Friday night. I want to see Caleb Hood. They had a short yardage situation in which I thought, hey, Sam should go under center, give him the ball to Caleb Hood. That's what we were told was a Caleb Hood specialty, and we didn't see it. Maybe we get a chance to see that Saturday night. We also might get a chance to see some Josh Henderson because, at some point, he's in his third year in the program. At some point, we're going to kind of figure out whether or not it's going to work for Josh Henderson or not. Might get to see some extended reps for Elijah Green, some of the backup offensive linemen. I want to see Caden Baker play. Those guys, William Barnes got 2 or 3 snaps the other night. Let's see him get some extended run if they can get a big lead. All that stuff's important. All that's part of the growth of the program. It's good for the team. Get to see Criswell, get to see Drake May perhaps. There are a lot of really important things that can come out of Saturday night's game. And I guarantee you, the folks that don't think so, the staff would tell you the same thing.
Real quick, this is a segue real quick, but I wanted to ask you this because I just thought about this when you were talking. Were you at all surprised at the lack of rotation that Carolina kind of had on the offensive defensive side of the ball against Virginia Tech, or did you kind of expect that game one on the road?
Well, I didn't know that the teams would run about 63 or 64 plays each. When you hear them talk about keeping guys fresh, a lot of that is going from 80 plays to 65. Well, if there's not an 80 play game and it's only a 63 snap game on one side of the ball, then you don't really need the reserves to keep guys fresh. Virginia Tech did a nice job chewing up clock. I mean, they shortened the game. Carolina offensively, when they got the ball back with 22 seconds left in the first half, the Tar Heels had run 18 offensive plays. There's no need to sub your lineman. Everybody's fresh. It's not an issue. So, and then Jay Bateman did say that the defensive line did have a little bit more of a rotation, and they were fresh and they were sharp in the second half. The defense was fast and quick and reactive in the fourth quarter. So I do think that, they did play 4 hybrid guys. Collins, Hopper, Tamon Fox, who played more snaps than I expected, and Des Evans. Those guys all played, so that spot was fresh. Tamon played 50 snaps, I think it was. Defensive line had some. There wasn't a lot of second line guys that played much of the secondary. Cam Kelly played like 4 plays. He was on the field with that touchdown pass. So Day Hollins played a little bit because they didn't use Duck because I think Michael had a couple issues out there, but. Yes and no. Yes, because I thought we'd see more guys, and I was waiting to see dudes running the field from my perch in the press box, which should be in the middle of the field. I'm not toward the end zone there. Yeah. But at the same time, when you see how the game played out, nobody played too many snaps, put it that way, because everybody on that roster should be able to handle 63 snaps.
It's a good point. Yeah. And like you said, I'm sure we'll see a lot more rotation if things go as planned against Georgia State.
Well, if you don't, then there's trouble.
Exactly. So, yeah. You gotta wait
and I think that's what's the value in playing this Virginia Tech in the opener. The ACC and TV said, okay, you guys do it. It certainly wasn't Mac's choice, Bubba's choice. But the value is this. You've got 11 more games to play. You now know a lot more about what your club needs to fix than a lot of other teams do. And now you get that game the next week to kind of put some of that. They can focus on some of those things without having as much a risk of losing the game. Now, they can lose. Okay. I'm sure Washington fans didn't expect Montana to roll into Seattle and hold them to a touchdown and win. You know what I mean? Upsets happen. Oh, yeah. Tulsa lost to an FCS team as well. Tulsa was supposed to be pretty decent. Washington was ranked. So it's not a gimme. You got to go out there and play football, but it does give them an opportunity to work on the stuff I've already said early and also get a lot of guys in the game, get them on film. If those third tier guys, some of those freshmen, you get 10 or 12 snaps and you get it on film, that goes a long way in their development. So there's a lot of good that can come from this game.
Definitely. And obviously winning is the most important, not just winning, but playing good. And like you said, hitting that standard, keeping that standard, setting that standard, not only on Saturday, but leading up to it during the week. So let's talk about Carolina a little bit. Obviously, I think I wrote this in my staff picks for the game, just kind of predicting what I think will happen. Obviously, I'm expecting a Carolina win, but one of the things that I'm kind of seeing defensively, I think for the defense, is a case of building off their performance, particularly in the second half in that fourth quarter, and carrying that into the next game and hopefully the rest of the season. Because I thought we saw a lot better of a defense once they calmed down. If you go listen to Jay Bateman's press conference on Monday, which I thought was really interesting, that he said he was really just trying to calm the guys down early. And you alluded to that early on, and obviously you were there in the flesh. I was watching it on TV. And
they looked, from my vantage point in the press box, they looked disoriented.
And that's what it looked like on TV.
It looked like they they were reading 5 or 6 different things at one time.
Yeah.
And they talked about the motions and some of the jet stuff that Virginia Tech was doing. I mean, they looked confused, and they played like it. Virginia Tech ran 32 plays on its first 3 series.
Yeah.
32 plays. They scored 2 touchdowns, and the fumble that Trey Morrison caused was at the 9-yard line. They were going in and they were scoring again. And they were going to put that game away before halftime. But then after that, the last 26 running plays that the Hokies ran, they gained 32 yards. So there was a lot of progress. They gained 93 yards in the second half. So there was a lot of progress on the defensive side. They made in-game adjustments, which is good. The kids figured some stuff out and they learned. That's very valuable.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I remember watching Jeremiah Gimmel, especially early on. I like to watch him on defense because he's a leader and he's the guy kind of calling the shots out there. And the amount of times I just saw him kind of looking around like guys out of position, like what the heck's going on, just pissed off. I mean, it was very evident early on. And like I said, I think that shifted in the second half and really in that fourth quarter as well, where I thought Carolina really stepped up and made some plays. I thought Jaquarius Conley had a really good game, especially in the second half as well. So I think there's a lot of positives to take from that performance that Carolina defensively will want to take into this Georgia State game, and continue to build on. But offensively, I wrote this in my stat pick, but I think it's a case of just getting back on track. I mean, this is an offensive line that I thought, for lack of a better word, just looked all out of sorts against Virginia Tech, especially when you consider who they have. I know Kieran Johnson was replacing Brian Anderson at that starting center spot, but still, when you're returning that amount of talent, Kieran Johnson's a guy that has played snaps and has gotten a lot of reps at Carolina before. When you're returning all 5 starters down there and have a backup center with experience, you're expecting that line to play a lot better. Go back and watch the highlights, which I did a couple of days ago. And the amount of times Virginia Tech just sends a 3-man rush and they're in the backfield of Sam Howell within less than 3 seconds. It happened numerous times, which it just shouldn't happen when you look at how talented and how big and how experienced that offensive line is. So for me, offensively,
and by the way, if you freeze the video, there are times where the Carolina linemen are still like in a blocking stance, if you will, and the Hokies behind them.
It's unbelievable.
Like they haven't even turned to react yet.
Yeah, it's crazy. And a lot of people complaining about Sam Howell, and just kind of a tangent, but going on that last play he had, I mean, he's running for his life again. I know he's trying to force it and probably shouldn't have thrown it away. I was trying to throw it away, and just the way it went down, it was also a questionable pick if it even was one. I think it was the right call in hindsight. But, I mean, it goes back to the thing where Sam Howell was out there running for his life, and a lot of times he's had less than 3 seconds to even drop back and do anything.
He threw 3 passes 20 yards or more downfield. Yeah. And he was 0 for 3. And I might as well just throw this at you too, because this will probably change Saturday night, but this just kind of illustrates all the problems that they had Friday. Not that we intended this to be a dissection of the game Friday, but he completed 17 passes Friday night. 7 were thrown behind the line of scrimmage, which he doesn't do a lot of unless he's throwing to the backs. Mm-hmm. That means there are 10 other completions. 5 between 0 and 9 yards downfield were in the middle range of the field, okay? Mm-hmm. And then 5 others between 10 and 19 yards downfield were also in the middle range. That meant there were only 2 completions, 1 on each side of the field, thrown past the line of scrimmage, thrown wide, that he had all night long.
Wow. Yeah. It just tells you all you need to know right there. You know what I mean? And
the receivers weren't getting separation. They weren't finding grass, but they have a lot of time to find grass. So, exactly. And that's where the red flags started out. Okay. So we said about what the positives are or what they can gain from it. What are some of the red flags that would be very, very concerning if you're a Carolina fan? Well, if Sam's under duress again, that's a big problem. I think the defensive front needs to establish a pass rush on its own. Mm-hmm. They don't need to blitz or anything like that. The one that Rucker, I believe, I don't think he was a defensive end on that play, but he was actually didn't have a hand on the ground. He was able to get around the lineman and made a really nice play. But you got to chase this quarterback and don't chase him and lose discipline. And he got 2 linemen running after him. Next thing he gets 12 yards. You've got to have discipline. So you've got to make this quarterback move. You got to get them a few times. This is a deal where the physicality aspect says, if you can't get the Georgia State's quarterback, then how are you going to get the Virginia's quarterback? That kind of thing. So, and they've said a point of emphasis was establishing a conventional pass rush from the down linemen. So they need to show some of that Saturday night. The receivers do need to get separation. They do need to go over the top. Don't just pick your way downfield. Don't throw screens to Chandler and have him run 25 yards. Don't throw slants to Josh Downs and he takes it, it's 5 yards in the air and he goes 45 yards on the ground. We know he can do that. He did the other night. You got to show some things that weren't really working the other night to show the physical stuff too. Because if some of those physical things aren't working, then they really got some issues to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. We've already talked about it a little bit, but just as we always do kind of in this preview podcast, what is one thing offensively and defensively that Carolina needs to do to win? Because for me, real quickly, I think offensively it's protecting Sam. I think that's number one. I think if you give Sam time in this game, there's plenty of talent out there that Carolina will put up points. And I think defensively I think there's a few different ways you could go with it, but I think defensively, like you said, if you can establish that pass rush without having to send blitzes, that's going to get Georgia State all out of sorts and really make them have to do a lot of different things to get open. You might force Brown to have to use his feet a little bit more, which could work out in Carolina's favor. So if you had to pick two things, one for offense, one for defense, what are the most important things you're looking at?
Well, give Sam time and it turns into a video game.
Yeah.
So
we've seen it before.
Give him time. There's no way they lose that game if he's not under duress. Okay, he'll put up sick numbers.
Yeah.
On the other side of the ball, it's first down defense. Whatever they do on first down, whether they're running right at him, or they're trying to run trickery, whether they're running option stuff, jet sweeps, you've got to be able to stop them on first down, and then put yourself in a position where you can generate a 3-man pass rush. And give it work and see if it works and also create some opportunities for turnovers and discipline. I want to see their discipline challenge from a quarterback that runs. Burmeister gave him a little bit of trouble at times in his first 3 possessions. There were times where it looked like there were no eyes on him. Yeah. You got to have eyes on the QB that can run, right? There were no eyes on him, and he got up, picked up a couple first downs that were very, very important. One was on that drive that led to the touchdown pass. So to Mitchell, who's a fantastic player. So that's the kind of stuff that, you have in a game like this, it can really, really benefit a team. I'm telling you right now, if the discipline is really strong, the staff will be very, very pleased. It will matter. The physicality will matter, but all that other stuff's going to matter more. And I know I'm going back to it, but that's what fans need to pay attention to. Just don't say, they're just going to roll over and beat these guys, roll around and beat these guys. It's not that big a deal. It's how you beat them. If Carolina play in basketball, and I'm going back to this too, because some people watching need these basketball examples. But let's say Carolina's playing North Carolina, Asheville, and they're having a tough time getting the ball inside, but they hit a bunch of threes and it kind of camouflages stagnant offensive movement and struggles with entry passes and bigs not getting open and all that kind of stuff. But they go, 14 for 25 from 3-point range, and they win by 25 points. That kind of camouflages the fact that they didn't really do a lot of things they should do to be a better team. And you don't want that in this game. You don't want Sam to get sacked 3 or 4 times and hurried 6 times and have, 8 run plays that are 0 yards or less, but he hits on 6 big passes for touchdowns and they blow him away that way. You think, okay, you move on. The staff will be very concerned about that other stuff, just like Roy would have been concerned about not getting entry passes. Roy would call timeouts and berate them for taking too many threes early because you got to be you. You got to do what you do. And this football team didn't do what it is the other night. This weekend, it must figure out who they are, go in with a mantra of who they are, and actually display that and execute to the standard, like you said before. You have a standard in a program. That's what this weekend's all about. Not just this weekend. It's today and it's tomorrow. It's everything. How they handle Friday night in the hotel room at home for the first time before a game in a long time. And you said something about the crowd. These guys last year, I think it was Longo said last week, the Syracuse game last year, the end of the third quarter, the players run over to the student section and do the 4 thing, right? Because it's the fourth quarter. And they did it last year at Syracuse. There's nobody over there. They're going to do it Saturday night in front of a full house. So are they too amped up? Do they overplay sometimes because they're amped up? Those are all really important things that I guarantee you the staff takes note on literally every one of those things.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
They are magnified within the walls of the Kenan Football Center.
100%. Since we did it last week, we got to end on this. I predicted I think I said 41-17 in our staff picks, which is you haven't seen our staff picks. We rolled those out on TarHeelIllustrated.com later in the week. So if you want to check those out and see what the staff is predicting for every game throughout the season, football and basketball, keep it locked to THI. But what are you saying for this game? Do you know what your score prediction is yet? Or
I haven't done it yet, but I think, to be perfectly honest with you, anything under 4 touchdowns. Again, we got to see how the snaps are. We got to see what the line of scrimmage looks like on every snap, but they should win this game by 4 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, Army beat them by 4 touchdowns. Army beat them by 33 points.
Yeah.
Carolina's better than Army. They got them at home. So I think anything less than 4 touchdowns from a score perspective would be disappointing, but I'm going to judge this game a lot more on those other things. And if they do those things, Jacob, it's going to be more than 4 touchdowns.
Definitely. If they play like they can. If
North Carolina is where North Carolina thinks it should be, it'll be more than that.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, standard, I think, is what Carolina's trying to reach and trying to keep. And like you said, like we've talked about a lot in this video, if you take anything away, it's going to be a big point of emphasis, not only in how we cover the team on Saturday and throughout the week, but for the staff and the players as well, kind of setting that standard and maintaining it throughout the season, no matter who you're playing. So, yeah, man, it should be a fun one. I mean, Kenan Stadium, I'm sure it's going to be a lot of people in the stadium for that game, and first game back in a couple of years, or over a year, I should say, for fans in terms of a full house. So going to be fun to see that atmosphere and kind of be back in it a little bit. I'm sure you're looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, it was great Friday night seeing people there. I went into the stands for about 25 minutes during warmups. Nice. Had some trouble with the videos I was trying to post on Twitter, as I texted you about, in frantic mode. And but it was nice just to see people enjoying themselves and being normal. And that's going to be really cool to see Friday night in Chapel Hill. And it's going to be fun. Night games are always cool. I like the noon games because I get home at night, but
it's a good point.
But covering the night games are fun. The buzz it's always more buzz in the stadiums.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah.
People have a lot more time to fill themselves up with antifreeze.
Exactly, man. Antifreeze. Yeah. Wink, wink on that one, right? Yeah. It's going to be a fun one. 7:30 p.m. kickoff. Yeah. 7:30 p.m. kickoff for the Tar Heels in Kenan Stadium on Saturday evening. I'm sure it's going to be a fun one. I'm sure Carolina fans are looking forward to that one, as well as Carolina prepares for Georgia State. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Appreciate everybody tuning in to the second episode of our preview podcast, which obviously we'll be rolling out for every football game this season. If you enjoyed it, let's do this. If you think Carolina is going to get the victory on Saturday evening against Georgia State, go ahead and hit a thumbs up on this video below. And as always, guys, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know every single time we upload as well. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.